So, if you're like many married couples and like me and my wife, if we own our property together as husband and wife, it's called tenants by the entireties, or a special kind of ownership for spouses. We owned our property together, and then all of our beneficiary designations are each other. So that's the common way that most married people have their assets titled in the United States. Now, if we are a typical American married couple, and I happen to die, so in our stories, the husband always dies first, and with me being the husband, I'm going to die first. The guy. So we have. I'm gonna stop that and start over again.
Okay.
So that's over. So next up is school bus story. So if you're like most married couples, their spouses will own their property jointly. Now in Maryland, we have something called tenants by the entireties, which simply means that married couples own things together so that the survivor automatically gets the assets upon the first spouse's death. Tenants by the entireties. Now, if we have other solo-owned things like retirement plans, 401ks or IRAs, they have to be owned as a single person, and that would be a beneficiary designation to the other spouse. So if my wife and I own our property that way and I pass away, what happens to that property? It all passes to my spouse. The surviving spouse wins all of the assets. So when the surviving spouse wins the assets in that situation, they now title them in their own name. All of the assets get titled. The joint accounts become titled in the survivor's name. So in my case, my wife's name is Regina. So Regina would get all of the assets that we had held together. Anything that I had in life insurance, any of my retirement plans would go to her. Okay, fine. And everybody may think that's great, and indeed it is. Until one day, maybe 3-4 years later, she happens to be driving down the road, and for whatever reason, she gets distracted. She doesn't see the stop sign coming up, and she drives through the stop sign. Okay, so she's into the intersection. Anything that would happen at that point is now her fault because she ran through that stop sign. And wouldn't you know, but passing through the intersection at the time she runs through is a school bus. And bam, she broadsides the school bus. Now, would you agree that a school bus is probably the last thing you would want to hit in the intersection? Because if it has 50 kids on board, those kids are going to be probably very sympathetic claimants and judgment creditors in the event that ever reaches a judgment in a court. So these folks are probably going to be generating a lot of liability. Remember, in that situation, Regina's liable because she went through the stop sign, and it's only a question of how much damage is done. So if there is a particularly injured person or two, then the damages could be quite severe. So remember, there's only an economic cap on damages if it's soft tissue injury and things of that nature. It's pain and suffering is the cap. Economic damage, so if someone has a traumatic brain injury because of this accident, then pretty much the sky is the limit on damages. So if the damage count is high enough so that Regina's auto insurance does not cover the entire amount of the judgment, where do you think those kids are going to go for payment? They're going to go past the insurance because the insurance is paid out, and they're going to go to the assets that she has. And they are going to go after the assets to cover the cost of the judgment. Now, if we had set up our estate plan properly, then when I left my assets to her, I would have left them to her inside of a family trust that would have protections for this type of a situation. The trust would prevent anyone but Regina from getting to those assets, and in particular, anyone who was a judgment creditor. So that means that anyone who filed a lawsuit against her and got a judgment against her could not come into that trust and take those funds away that I had left for her in a protected manner to support her standard of living. The school bus trust, which we call this kind of a trust, has the built-in protections and allows only Regina to get into that trust. It's supported by case law in Maryland and by statute as well. So a school bus trust for your spouse provides for personal protections if you want to leave your property to your people that way, protected from their later creditors.